Hello, everybody. Scott McMeans with Action Coach SBL. I'm here today with Jeremiah Landi from Landi Industries. He's going to talk a little bit about his background, a little bit about what he's done to get to the point where he is right now, a very successful business guy. Interesting storyline. I think, Jeremiah, you made comment to me at one point that you're an engineer but a different kind of engineer. So before we get into all that, I want to give you the chance to introduce yourself because your story is so cool. So Jeremiah, the microphone, the camera are yours. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been described as like blue collar Jesus, right? So like whenever I talk about engineering or anything, everybody always says I tell really relatable stories. So I
Love
started
it.
my company about 10 years ago. So, with any good founder, you're kind of intertwined with what you do. So prior to this, I was a fixer, traveled all over the world and really tried to tackle projects and problems that were massive. Um, Great line of work, a lot of money to be made. However, when it came to it, there was a lot of problems I saw. So it was a lot of like how hardware was being developed, how projects were getting pushed along. And so at some point, I just had a conversation with my wife and decided to do my company full time. And really, what we try to tackle at Landi Industries early on into this day is how do we deliver products and how do we deliver them well to a market that wants them, right? Which a lot of engineering firms just want to deliver products, for the right cost. At Landy, we are a 14-man company. So we're in Cleveland, Cincinnati, Chicago, and Denver. We do mechanical, electrical, firmware, and software. Software's a little bit deep, but there's a lot of different facets to that. And we really focus on doing a lot of product development up first. So very similar to what you do with businesses, we make sure that they have a pretty sound idea of what they're going to sell, how much they're going to sell it for before they give us money. With hardware, you don't get it back. So if you have a bad business structure or a bad selling plan or you're at the wrong customer, like you can't suddenly just drop price because, you have a raw good.
Yeah. Yeah. So walk me through the pathway. I love the comment of blue collar Jesus because we've had a conversation before and you're downplaying your level of genius and what you've been able to do. So talk to me a little bit about some of the highlight products that you've worked on so people get a connection to your philosophy of let's not overcomplicate the very simple way of just designing a product to make sure it reaches the market. And when it reaches the market, it has applicable value. Because I think one of the things I find most interesting about small businesses is we love to complicate things. Instead of just taking it at face value and trying to solve for X, we're trying to figure out all these different variables that can contribute to X instead of just, wait, time out. What is X? What are we trying to do? So walk us through what you've done. And if you can, highlight some of the products you've worked on, because there's some pretty big names in there too.
Yeah, so early on when I started the engineering company, I thought a lot of the problems that I saw out in the industry from my experience from working in engineering was just purely a hey communication issue or like just something with engineering, right? So it's like, oh well, if we just do better engineering, communicate, rather than having a dozen cooks in the kitchen, like what if we simplify it, and that was one part of the story. After about 4 years, what we realized, so we worked with Magnet, we worked with Jumpstart, a bunch of these different organizations within Ohio, right? And what we realized is that yes, we're bringing really good products to market, whether it's for large computer OEMs or whether it's for, big helicopter companies through the DoD and that stuff. Like what it really was is that we found that they didn't always have an idea of where they were going with the market. So you'd always start with this problem of saying like, hey, look, like I think this is what I want. And I think, you having talked to a lot of founders, probably see this a lot. I talk to a lot of founders in business. Like we think what one problem is and we don't know. So we helped a large computer manufacturer down that path. And what we found is when they first came to us, what this was during the big early days of AI boom. So this was probably about 8 years ago. So when Facebook was just releasing custom servers. So this company came to us. They're an international company, right? Known for laptops, things like that. And what they wanted to do was develop a new high density cluster of servers. And so when they came to us, they're like, okay, we just want you to develop some patents, like take this and roll. But then what we found out is the deeper we got into the project and the more we talked to the customers that would buy this, the more that they valued density and feature rich. And so we ended up doing a bunch of really cool custom development that was proprietary IP. God knows what some of the large companies you do work for do it with, but it really helped vet it. I think the other thing too is that we have taken a huge step back to make sure that we mitigate risk.
Mhm.
I think this is a very pertinent conversation with businesses understanding what their lane is and what they're really developing for IP. So in the early days, we also used to just, trust, not knocking founders or us business people. We just trust that when they showed up, they knew what they wanted, they knew where they were going, and they knew what their core beliefs were, right? And so we've worked on a lot of products. We worked with one large agency that sends stuff to the space station. And when we started the project, they pay really well, and it was about a 9 month or 12-month project. And when we started, it was a server that collected data on the space station, and then it correlated. And the whole problem they had was they needed to get data back to Earth in a certain order. So we call that caravanning. And then the way that it was working now is it was lagging and that stuff. So when we started, that was kind of the core principle. And then they meandered all over the place. But what we found out is that we really drove down into like what makes the product successful and what they're really trying to solve. Because with them, they had so much money, like such an unbelievable money. And when you launch your own rockets, you don't really care if you miss deadlines. And so with no deadlines and no budget, how do you guide a business to where their product should actually be? Because with that, you're not really going to end up. And so we worked with them to understand the different requirements that NASA had about putting things on the space station, really drove down what separated what they were trying to do versus competitors. So really analyzed different people's servers that were going space and really said like, how do we make their server a unique experience? And also found out that every time NASA touches your server, it's like $1 million. So we help them understand like how do we make sure that redundancy is a forefront? Because yeah, they have infinite money, but again, like if something breaks over and over again, you're just gonna burn a ton of
Mhm.
cash and not get there. So yeah.
Okay, so a lot just poured out there. Let's take a step
Sorry.
back.
Yeah.
I want people to understand your business is an engineering firm. At its
Correct.
core, that's what you do.
Yep.
But what separates you from any other engineering firm, and this is something we talked about in our first conversation, you take out the minutia, you take out the ancillary stuff that I'm not saying it's not necessary, but it's unnecessary right now when you're trying to solve problem X. And you have this innate ability to strip away all the crap and just focus in on what needs to be focused in on, and then you solve that problem. If another problem comes along or something else surfaces, you're more connected to the situation. You can easily solve that. I say this because it's an incredible lesson I want people to learn from business. Take away all the crap that doesn't mean anything. Take away all the unnecessary noise that you're hearing and just focus on what needs to be done today so you can get to tomorrow. And the biggest challenge most people have is they don't know how to go from day to day or bucket to bucket, from problem to solution. They struggle with just getting through the minutia. Okay. What I love about what your story is you have this amazing 10-year-old company and you've started it with the idea of, I know there's a lot of problems. I know I have solutions, but I'm not going to complicate it. So when you, Jeremiah, when you pitch your services, it's all about the simplest way to the end. That's what we do. We're not going to make this any more complicated than necessary. So, given the different products and big time companies, like you're dropping NASA, that you're in space, all those wonderful things, what are some of the what are the lessons that you've learned so far that you can say, this is why we do it this way, because we learned this lesson? I think that that's something that people would adhere themselves to or attach themselves to is like, okay, this guy's been in business for 10 years and he's doing all these great elaborate things. What's the simplest lesson I can learn from him? That's what we're looking for.
The ironic thing I would say about this is that I probably have not learned the simplest lesson that I've learned from working with other customers, and that is telling your story, telling it early, and then
Mm,
telling it well. I have a lot of people that I network with, and I often get told, Jeremiah, you've done all these impressive things, but you're just some dude that lives in Wadsworth. Like you don't really sell yourself, and growing up on a sheep farm, that's not, you didn't go out and you didn't sell like yourself. You're selling, figuratively an animal at that point. But what I would say is that that is one of the hugest lessons because I think that getting your product out in front of people as soon as you can, as fast as you can, and understanding what failure looks like and success is critical. And I think that that's just a generic business lesson. So I do a lot of engineering, and it's amazing that when we work with large corporations, so we worked with the number one supplier of cornstarch in the world, right? And when you really start asking the question, you go, well, what do you do and why you do it? It it's very different than what they're currently doing. And then when you ask the question along the lines of like, well, why would we do this? They have their internal reasons. So as a business person, we may have a reason why we're doing the marketing or why we're doing a strategic direction. But most of the time, it's just our gut feeling on whether something is going to be successful or not. We
Yeah.
don't really know if it's going to be successful. And I tell a lot of people, like, yes, you have to be careful of people stealing your ideas, right? So if we go back to the windshield, right, that was stolen by the Ford Motor Company, long lawsuit, guy settled for 383 million, right? But at the same time, like ideas go to die in the dark. I was always told that the richest place for ideas in all of the world is the graveyard. And so with that in mind, I always tell companies I work with, like, look, get your ideas out there, get them rudimentary out there. So the least amount of money and the least risk that you can do, see if there's any traction and then roll it in there. And I think that for us, if you don't have foundationally a good business, there's no job in hiring us. To go back to what we were talking about before, what makes us different is we work to get fired. So we very much push fiduciary services. So when you hire us, we don't try to stay on forever and we try to find problems before we start. So I just had a conversation with a 3D printing cement company this morning, right? And so I was talking to them, and one of the things I said is like, look, we probably have to revamp some of your business model. So, and I spent a significant amount of time just asking that question because before we get to the engineering, you don't want to pay me for something you're not going to get back, right? Like a lot
Mhm.
of our customers say that we care and they feel like we're part of the team, and that's because a marriage is two-way, right? Like you don't just get
Yeah.
married because it's utilitarian. And I tell this with everybody in business, right? Why do we take so much time putting together a business or a business team or our board, but then when we hire our consultants, we just kind of throw them in, hope they do well. And we see this a lot with marketing, right? Like a lot of companies just think I'm going to publish a couple articles, boom, I'm going to have a ton of customers. And you're like, no, you got to build relationships. It's the same thing across the board, right? Like you can't
Hmm.
just throw a product out, a new hairbrush or whatever, and then just expect people to find it. I think I just gave a talk at Baldwin Wallace College yesterday about IP. And one of my favorite memes on it was two engineers sitting there that basically said, hey, we just invented a better mousetrap. Why don't we sit here and wait for the market to slash through the jungle to find us so we could get rich, you know? And
Yeah.
I'm like, look, like that's not how it works. Just because you build it, they won't come, you know. But yeah, I think that those are some of the most valuable lessons, but getting your story out there and finding any validation, even from other founders or competitors.
Well, I think I'm going to use rock and roll quotes, right? It's market research when you see what your competition's doing and then you steal it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's not protected with IP, right? One of the things you said, Jeremiah, I really like, and that is failure and success, they're kind of tied together, right? One gets you the next, which gives you the opportunity to fail so you can do your success story again. So if you're comfortable with the failure and success circle, man, you could be really successful. You just have to be very comfortable in failing. And one of the things that you made comment to that is one of your value propositions is we're going to help you fail early enough so we identify what the problems are, then we can fix it. Um, I think back to Microsoft and Apple when they were first coming out. Apple was recognized as being far superior technology. But why was Microsoft so much better received in the marketplace? Because it was first. And at the time, Bill Gates took the opportunity to get into the businesses and then filtrated the personal computing world. It was just a brand recognition piece. I'm simplifying the case, right? But it goes back to your point of you don't have to be so good and perfect. You just have to get out there and let people know who you are.
And I think the other thing too, along that point, is divergent thought process, right? So if we go back to Bill Gates, when he started it, right, there was another guy there, and this is where it gets a little bit, weird, but essentially he did take it to IBM where the other guy wouldn't, like, right? The other guy was on vacation. And so what it doesn't always mean that you have to be ruthless or like sacrifice a lot of morals to be successful. But I think what I tell a lot of people is in business, it's not great to be linear all the time, right? Like one straight thought process does not always yield results. And then plus, like, let's look at the coal mining industry, right? To kind of own a pun here, a vein's only so deep, right? You got to ahead of time understand where you're prospecting, where you're going. You got to evaluate the amount of value you're going to get from that vein when you should pull out, right? Because at a coal mine, they don't mine all the coal. They mine to a certain percentage, right? And so there's
Right.
still coal in there. And so I think to that point, it is bringing in the people that really challenge you. I also tell people that as a business, it's what Abraham Lincoln did with when he had a cabinet of people that were dissenters. So there were people that didn't agree with him, right? And I know there's a lot of takes on Lincoln, positive and negative, but I think one of the things that I did take away from that is that by having a bunch of people that constantly question what you're doing, it means that you're constantly in this limbo of, am I doing it right? And then as a founder, I had a really good conversation with a woman that is like one of the top small businesses for wine distribution, right? And she says you have to have faith in your directionality and your belief in what you can do, right? So as a founder, you could account for all these variations. You need to
Mhm.
have constant eyes all around you, but at the same time, you have to just trust that your leap going forward is the right direction. So at the end of the day, the buck stops at you, both figuratively and literally. So
Yes. No, I think you're right. And going back to the divergent of thought process, you can have this amazing vision and work your tail off to make that vision a reality. But what if your vision was wrong and you're not listening to somebody that's telling you, listen, you're trying to do something that's never been done before and you're doing it the wrong way. There's a challenge to keeping a mindset so rigid that you don't accept additional thought. That's like trying to run through a football field with blinders on. You can't do it, right? So you have to have peripheral vision. And I think what's interesting about your business and what you do, you are the peripheral vision. You're allowing people to see the different thought processes that could lead to a better result because you're solving a problem. You're not trying to build a mansion. You're not trying to build something that's so big. You're solving this problem. Now, granted, it's connected to their vision, connected to what they want to do at the marketplace. I get that. But you're going from one bucket to the next. Okay, we solved this problem. It works. We know it works. It's going to be viable in the marketplace. Now what? Right? And I think too many businesses are trying so desperately to have that perfect thing, widget, service, whatever. They're trying to be so perfect that they fail to be good. And what we need to do is have businesses that are more mindful of how do I get to be good at what I do? Then I'll build myself to be better. Then eventually I'll be the best in the business. You don't just show up. I mean, the draft was recently taking place for the NFL, right? None of those guys are going to be the best in the business. They're rookies. At some point, you have to learn, you have to develop skill sets and become better at what you do because you're going to fail countless times. And that's what's so unique about business. Nobody wants to fail, but it's a really good lesson. It's a really
I
good
think
lesson.
I think the other thing too, yeah, I think my dad always told me the most expensive lessons you'll pay for. Like when I listened to the guy from Otterbox, which I recited the story, I think his name's like Curtis, right? When he started Otterbox, he really struggled to get off the ground. So he ran a machine shop and he would work out of his garage, right? And so he owned a building, couldn't afford it, went back to his garage, and was back and forth. And he was telling a story about how his wife was just super pissed at him because he's dragging shavings everywhere. And he's like, look, I need to figure out how to get this business going. We're making phone cases, but we're not really doing anything, right? And so he hired a consultant for $5,000. He said he didn't have. And he said the consultant said, look, what you need to do is you need to work on things the business needs you to work on, not things that you enjoy. And he said that was the most painful but most accurate lesson ever. And I think that as a engineer is very telling, but also as a business owner, right? As an engineer, it's always those points where when people are making products, they really work on things that they enjoy. So you'll see these products that are really like lopsided, really
Yeah.
developed out, really thought through. But then you look on the other side and you're like, well, where's your regulatory stuff? They're like, well, we don't enjoy that. Or you go, hey, where's your user testing? They go, well, we don't really enjoy talking to people. And so it's this weird like beast you end up building. But it's true for businesses too. So businesses like most founders don't, to your point, like failure or rejection. And so as a founder, you have to get over some people just don't like you, right? Some people you'll meet, they'll kick you, or some people you just don't jive with, and then they'll find their group, but then they'll be too afraid to leave it. I think what it is I got to go to a great talk last week where I got to hear Judy, and she's a bird expert, and she was talking about how ecosystems are what causes birds to flourish, right? There's so many different types of them because the ecosystem provides the support, the nurturing they need so that the bird can really find its niche and dive in. And I think that's very true is that you have to expose yourself to the right amount of elements.
Yep.
But at the same time, if you expose yourself to the wrong elements, like you're not going to go far.
Well, okay. Excellent point. Um, Enjoying what you do versus things you need to do, right? There's so many different ways to think about this, right? I've always told people, and I coach them along this way. If you like doing it, you're good at it, and it makes you money, you should keep doing it. If it's not one of those things, you gotta give it to somebody else to do. But here's the wrinkle that makes everybody go, oh, it's not that you are good at it, makes you money, and you enjoy doing it are all the same thing. Those are not mutual, they're mutually exclusive, right? You could find something that you're good at, you like to do, and it makes you money, perfect, keep doing it. But if it's something you're good at, but you really don't like doing it, and it's not making you money, why are you doing it? Right? So to get back to your point of the guy really likes tinkering in his garage. It's great. He likes doing it, but it's not making him money. And so far, he's shown he's not really good at it. So find somebody to help you that's good at that stuff. And that's where I believe you come into play, where if that guy would have talked to you, you're like, wait a second, you're grinding away, you're doing all these things. It's not helping you. Here, let's solve this problem. And then he could be able to move forward. Because I believe as a leader of a business, it should have an embodiment of who you are as a person, your values, your vision, your mission for what you want to do. I think that's there. But if you're doing it alone and you're not taking the contributions from others, to your point, that would have a divergent thought, you're missing out on the opportunity to see the blind spots in your own vision. That's where I think really cool stuff happens, right? Because you get people that light upon yonder window break. They finally got it. Like, oh my God, it was so simple. It was right there in front of me. But thank you for being the one who pointed that out. But if you live in a silo, you never get a chance to really have that experience come to you or bring it to somebody else. And that's why, again, I keep coming back to the services that you provide. It's all about finding those grooves that people aren't finding for themselves. And it's because, not because they're bad at what they do, Jeremiah, that's not it at all. It's they're so good at what they do, they're not seeing the options or opportunities that are right there because they just don't know that world or they don't know why that's a problem. And that's where I think consultants, coaches, engineers like yourself, we are not vitally important, but we're pretty damn important to get people out of their own way.
I really like when you said out of your own way. I think that's the majority of I always tell people you should be hiring consultants as an accelerator, right? I think often people look at hiring consultants as a way to offset for long term, right? But also always tell businesses like if I wanted a full-time job, I would just go get one, right? So my job in essence should be temporary, but I think that it's a very good thing to hammer home to that. And I think that finding the right consultants to help you accelerate at the given times are critical. But I think it's going back to what we talked about earlier, understanding risk mitigation in your business. So what you actually sell, how much you're willing to sell it. Like we saw during COVID, a ton of businesses overreach, right?
Yeah.
And then hiring people to accelerate at those given times, right? Because the beautiful thing about a consultant, I mean, Scott, I'm not gonna poop on us too much, but I mean, we could be fired at any time, right? Like we're
Sure.
not W-2. So when you come around, that's what I always tell different companies is the reason why you hire me is that yes, you could staff up 15 people, or yes, you could staff up a whole team of people that do what I do. But at the same time, it would be a lot easier to get your sea legs with me, figure out what you need from me, and then let me go so that you can figure out electrically. And then also to go back. yes, you could hire people with deep expertise, but a lot of consultants are very well rounded, right? So when you hire us, you got 10 years of projects. We've done about 12 to 15 projects a year, right? So you're getting all that institutional knowledge when you hire me, just like you see a wide range of businesses. When I
Yeah.
bring you in, I'm not just bringing in Scott, some dude, right? I'm bringing Scott, the dude that has seen a lot of businesses and seen a lot of stuff go down and can really help me when I'm in the boils of problems, you know?
No, that's well said. And I've made this comment multiple times as well. Every business has four main problems: time, money, people, and motivation. Every problem falls into one of those four buckets, or could be when it comes to people, they kind of reach into motivation and what have you. But in essence, I don't care if you're a Ford Motor Company or you're Ford's dry cleaner. Everybody has those four problems. They do because it's all about building a team that's within a system that can work. And if you're not doing that, you're missing out on the opportunity to build an amazing business. That's just it. I This has been an amazing conversation. I have a thought for you or a question. If I were to put you in a time machine and send you back to meet the 18-year-old Jeremiah. You two meet up at a park. You're sitting on a park bench. What is the conversation like between you now and the 18-year-old Jeremiah?
I think I think it is to just tell him to trust in the process and then try to learn as feverishly as possible, right? So I worked a lot of different jobs. I worked at Starbucks, I worked at Highland, I was at Nobel Prize, right? So like I worked at a lot of different companies, got to meet people from all over the world. I think that younger Jeremiah, but I guess this would be for pretty much everybody that's young, kind of was a little bit too aggressive in what he thought he would do. And I think that transcends into business owners and everything. Like whenever you're doing it, I was taught there's three states of knowledge, right? There's not knowing what you don't know, knowing but not knowing, and then knowing you don't know and not knowing, right? And
Yeah.
those are three different states. And as you get older, that's where you get into the, well, I know I don't know, but I do know some things. And I think stepping back, it would be a lot of just calm your horses down. Things will be a lot easier. And I think the other thing that I've learned as I got older, so this is an interesting take. One of my really good business mentors is from Ernst and Young, and he's been my mentor for since I was like 16, right? So I have random meetings with him, and he gives me advice. And one of the large discussions we had was Jeremiah pre-kids versus post-kids, right? So I think that,
Different.
yeah, having been a father, right now, so I got a 3 and a 6-year-old, which totally dates this cast. So if I ever try to pretend it in the future, everybody will go, "Oh, how old are your kids?" But I think to kind of look back on it, you can't yell at somebody that doesn't know what they're doing wrong. And so as a business owner, it really made me mature and realize, look, I have this 1-year-old or 2-year-old that doesn't get logic, doesn't get things right. So as
Mhm.
an engineer, you're just taught like you follow the path, there is right and wrong, and you're there. And then when you become a parent, you start realizing like, oh, foundationally, I need to have a lot more patience. So I grew up blue collar, worked a lot of like electrical jobs, carpentry jobs, and there they just like screamed at you, right? Like I was talking to my boss yesterday. He's like, "Oh yeah, we had some good matches." And I was like, "Yeah, I know that's just blue collar, right?" But as you move into white collars, you start managing it like that causes a lot of stress. And the other thing that it's done is that I have employees now that have kids, so they'll show up for work and their energy's like way through the top, right? So they're already ready to gun. Like a young Jeremiah, they called it, what was it? Grant called it 4 a.m. ready, right? You wake up and you're going, right?
Yeah.
So like young Jeremiah had so much splits or whatever it's called, like, like so much guts and glory. He was just willing to go. But I think like as I got older, like, and I think this would probably be a lesson that I'd impart on myself is take more time to breathe and like really
Mm.
work through the problem and really don't take what the other person is saying to heart. So a lot of the times people don't. My dad always says
Right.
everybody speaks English, but we don't speak the same English, right? So I
Mhm.
think one of the key factors I took away from that was like when I was talking to my mentor, you have to learn the language that they're trying to speak to you and the words that you need to give them to give the information back. And I think that
Yeah.
as a business owner, that's something that's hugely overlooked. Both when we work with customers, it's setting communication up front early. Like many of my customers have very transparent communication with us, which is what they like. They want to be challenged, but there's an appropriate way to challenge, and there's an inappropriate. Like
And
if I
there's
start
a way to
telling
say,
you, yeah,
well, look, yeah, and there's a way to say whatever you're saying with
yep,
this little, um, this isn't personal. I'm
yep,
just telling you information, right? So let's take a step back. That's interesting stuff. I love the idea of learn feverishly. I think that's what you said. The
yep.
idea of I don't care if you're 8 or 80, pick up a book and read or watch a YouTube video, whatever you need to do, but gain new knowledge every day because you have no idea what you're going to be exposed to. You have no idea what's possible to learn. And put it in your quiver, and it's another arrow that you can pull out and do something tremendous with because it's something different that you learn. And I think that's tremendous advice for folks. Jeremiah, you can't believe it, but it's been almost half an hour. So great conversation. I think it's great. Tons of good lessons in here. Um, all the information that anybody would want to get in touch with Jeremiah will be in the description down below. I highly recommend you get in touch for anything. He might help you solve a really simple problem because that's what he does. I want to thank you. Any final words?
Yeah, I guess the stereotypical keep dreaming. So as I
Oh,
tell all the businesses, like sometimes it really gets dark and you can't really see through the fog of the night, but you got to remember like your dream's what lights the way. So yeah.
fantastic way to end this. Thanks so much. We'll see everybody on the next episode. Thanks.